What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Mushoku Mondays. We are on Volume 6, Chapter 9. Yes, the second turning point. And my gosh, I have been absolutely excited beyond belief about this particular chapter. And I mean, it was just basically, I was curious as to what really was missed with the adaptation, and it far exceeded my expectation, which I guess is a bad thing because what I expected to get extra reading it means that there's a lot of stuff that was missed. And I think there's a lot of context that was honestly missed with the adaptation of this chapter, and yes, technically chapter 10 as well. Now, I don't know how long this will be. Hopefully I can cover both 9 and 10. I guess you know by the title by this point, but I don't know when I'm recording it because I have way too much stuff to talk about. So as usual, definitely appreciate everybody that supports the channel, shares this video out, hits the like button, leaves a comment no matter what it is, just to help the algorithm. Those that join us every single Monday for Mushoku Mondays premieres, it's a lot of fun talking to you guys, and it has been an absolute blast. I want to start off by saying, please, everybody, keep your comments in check, because I'm going to be speculating on so much stuff. Technically, with Chapter 9, Orsted opens up a floodgate of possibilities, and technically, Nanahoshi as well. I don't want to know anything. If I speculate on things, that's just me speculating. I don't want the answers to them. I want everybody that is joining in with me and reading through this stuff. Let's all have fun and speculate together. And I definitely appreciate everybody so far that has been keeping all the spoilers in check. I really do appreciate it. I think it's a testimony to how much people love this series when they try their hardest to avoid trying to spoil something, because they want others to experience that aha moment with, just the same time they did. Not provide the aha moment. That way it just kills it. But yes, I just want to get that out there. Please keep your chats, keep your comments. Just reread it and really realize, is this something that I would have want to know at that time? No, that's not necessarily the way. I know there's some people out there like, yeah, just tell me everything. Do they really need to know this? I don't really want to spoil this. Do they know this yet? I guess is the best way to put it. Do they know this yet? They wouldn't know this yet. I don't need to be telling them that. So with that said, with that out of the way, let's jump into it, because I am so damn excited to talk about these two chapters. So, yes, Chapter 9, the second turning point. Opening up the chapter, yes, Rudeus and team have just entered the Red Worm lower jaw. Rudeus mentions that the Red Worm's lower jaw was a ravine that cut a path directly through the mountains. The path wasn't straight like the Holy Sword Highway, but it didn't split or fork either. It is a territory that's actually between the borders, meaning that nobody has claimed this area. Why would you want to? And once you get through it, you're at the Asura Kingdom. So yes, their spirits were high. They were sensing that the end of their journey was finally at hand. Though they obviously felt a little bit concerned as to what kind of awaited them, like what all is changes, what is even left there. Still, they had a sense of accomplishment. This long, 2-year journey was finally coming to a close. And yes, their guard was down. It was along that path that they came. Walking steadily the opposite direction, there was a man of silver hair, golden eyes, no armor to speak of, just an unassuming white coat, made of some sort of leather. Rudeus' impression of this man was that he simply just had a dangerous look in his eyes. His irises were small enough that you could see the whites all around them. However, Rudeus' eyes were more drawn to the person that was with this man, a young girl with black hair that followed him. Upon further inspection, her hair was more of a dark brown shade, slightly ashen. Normally, Rudeus wouldn't remember somebody by their hair color, but it shouldn't have been too hard to remember somebody with pure black hair. Except, Rudeus couldn't recall anyone like that. The other reason this girl caught his eye was that she had a mask that was covering her face. Pure white, nothing drawn on it. A mask with no decoration. There was nothing particularly memorable about it, and yet, if you saw it once, you'd never forget it. Since it stood out so horribly, he doubted that it was being worn as a fashion statement. Rudeus was so distracted that he never noticed Rugier sitting next to him in the carriage. Face white as a sheet. Eris, technically the same as well. With each step that this man and woman took towards them, Eris's face hardened, and her grip on her sword grew tighter and tighter, turning white. As the man approached, and he came towards the carriage to pass them by, he suddenly stopped. His head gave a curious tilt. Could you be a Sepud? I don't know. I can't do a Kendra Suda. As much as I love Kendra Suda, I can't do a Kendra Suda. It's like so back throat nasally. And I could do one or the other, but I can't do both at the same time. So it either sounds like, could you be a Sepud? It sounds more like Silence of the Lambs or something. Could you be a Sepud? At the time, Rajerd was shaved bald. and his third eye was covered up. So Rudius is wondering, how does this guy know that he's a Superd? Does he give off some sort of weird smell that Rudius is not aware of? At this point, Rudius turned to Rijerd. Is he an acquaintance? And then he was cut off. Cut short by the fact that Rijerd's face was, even though, yes, normally his skin was quite white, he was paler than usual. It was beaded with cold sweat. His hand was trembling as he held his spear. Rudius knew exactly what this look was. It was fear. Yes, Rijerd, the guy we all know as being like super overpowered, crazy warrior, is in fear. Which, yes, we'll know why later on, but let's go with it here. Rijerd says, Rudius, whatever you do, don't move. Eris, you either. He said this with a tremor in his voice. Eris's face was bright red. She looked like she might leap forward at any moment, but yet her arms and her legs were both trembling. Rudius at this point is wondering, has Rijerd met this guy before? The man says, that voice. You must be Rijerd Superdia. I didn't recognize you without your hair. What are you doing here? The man approached them casually. Rijerd readied his spear. On a whim, Rudius decided to use his demon eye. However, the man's body splintered into multiple images. There was so many of them that he couldn't exactly get an outline of his body. He thought to himself, what the heck is going on? The man says, the one with the red hair. Eris Boreas Greyrat. And the other? Who are you? Not the face I know. Oh well, I see what's going on here. Rijerd Superdia. You love children. So these two must have been the ones that were teleported to the demon continent during the incident. You brought them all the way here. He nodded, with an all-knowing look on his face. Eris yells out, how do you know my name? Honestly, Rudius was shocked by her words. Was this the first time they've met? I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if Eris forgot, but this man wasn't exactly somebody you would forget. Just his appearance. And then there was the matter of the abnormal reaction the two were having. Rijerd yells, who the hell are you? And why do you know my name? Rijerd thrusted his spear out towards the man. Shocked once again that Rijerd apparently doesn't know who this guy is. Though, Rijerd's famous. It'd be more understandable if somebody knew who he was. But he wasn't really well known in the central continent, remember? But Eris, again, was a different story. Though, again, if you heard the stories about this red-haired, crazy swordsman, I'm sure most people would probably take a rough guess. Rudius found a strangeness about this guy's attitude, or rather the difference between their reactions and what he's doing. He came across as friendly. His voice was flat, and Rudius didn't really know where this stemmed from, there was a quality to it that made him sound happy, like he had just been reunited with some old friends. And Rijerd looked the opposite. Rijerd was treating him like an enemy, but he hadn't attacked. And neither did Eris as well, who was typically the first to attack. She hadn't moved at all. And Rudius kind of felt as if it wasn't because Rijerd told her not to. The man says, this is a curious place to meet you, but you seem well. That's good. He laughed in a self-deprecating way and took a step back. The girl with him muttered, are you sure? Replying to her, he says, it's unavoidable at this point. And then said, I'll stay out of your way. The man moved to the side, and the woman followed him. Then he said, you'll know who I am. Eventually. Intuitively, Rudius knew this man knew something. He felt a vibe from him that he was the same as the man god. So Rudius had to have him tell him what it was. Please wait. The man looked back at him, face etched with surprise. And yes, Rijerd and Eris as well. Both looked at him shocked. What is it? What do you want? Greetings. My name is Rudius Greyrat. Oh, never heard of you. Wait. Greyrat, is it? What are your parents' name? Before I get into that, what is your name? All right. I'll tell you. I'm Orsted. Rudius glanced at Rijerd for a minute and realized that it didn't seem like he recognized the name. Are the two of you acquainted? No. Not yet. Not yet. What does that mean? You don't need to know. Now, who are your parents? Paul Greyrat. Paul shouldn't have a son. He should have 2 daughters. Orsted looked as if he realized something. He tilted his head and slowly approached Rudius. Rijerd yelled at, don't come any closer. Yes, I know. He stopped, but he was still staring at Rudius's face. Then their eyes met. You don't turn away your eyes, huh? I'd like to turn them away as soon as possible, since the look in your eyes is terrifying. So, that means you don't feel any fear. His brows furrowed. So, what do you want? Well, I just thought that maybe you knew something about the displacement incident. I don't. Rudius in his head felt something was odd about the attitude towards him. It was as if he was cautious about Rudius, as if he was being distant from Rudius more than Eris and Rijerd. Rudius realized, even if he knew something, he probably wouldn't tell him about it. All right, I'm sorry to have stopped you. It was then, as Rudius bowed his head, Orsted said, are you perhaps familiar with the name Man God? Finally, The guy had said something that Rudius could understand. Part of Rudius's problem was that he had let his guard down, thinking that their conversation was already over. Another part of it was that he had purposely avoided saying anything about the man god to anyone. And now, suddenly someone had spoken the god's name. Particularly a person who is so thoroughly confused Rudius. So naturally, thinking that this was some sort of knowledge that the both of them shared, that would continue the conversation. He reacted without thinking. So Rudius casually said, "I do." He appears in my dream, and then suddenly, Rudius's vision changed. Orsted's hand was going to spear right through his chest. Then suddenly, the vision disappeared again. Rizurd wedged himself between the front of him, blocking his attack. Rudius was sent reeling backwards. Looking up, Rudius can see Orsted peering over Rizurd's shoulder, glaring at Rudius. His eyes were cold. Rizurd was shouting, "Rudius, run! You're in the way, Rizurd Superdia." Rudius didn't even have a chance to run. That's the problem. It was over in a matter of seconds. Orsted batted him away like a human swatting a fly. Rizurd was strong, probably more than a king-tier swordsman, but Rudius can tell, using the demon eye, that he had lost. Time-wise, it only lasted about 10 seconds. Every move Rizurd made, he was at a slight disadvantage. Each attack, his balance suffered slightly, and each attack he tried to launch was stalled. Orsted's skills just overwhelmingly surpassed Rizurd's. Orsted was clearly drawing Rizurd into a trap. He was moving as little as possible, and yet the fastest speed possible, rendering Rizurd powerless. It was as if Orsted was mocking Rizurd, purposely putting himself in a position to invite powerful consecutive attacks, only to throw him off balance, cause him to stagger, create an opening in his defense, and forcing Rizurd to guard himself against heavy counterattacks. There was nothing Rizurd could do. He took a fist to the solar plexus, and then grazed to the tip of his chin, and then a third robbed him of his consciousness right in the temple. Orsted could have killed him, but he didn't. Even someone as remarkable as Rizurd, Orsted was able to hold back. Now then, Edis screamed and leapt in front of Rudius, whipping her blade fast as an arc of light. Secret technique, flow. Orsted wasted no time on Edis. He gently stopped her sword with the palm of his hand, or at least to Rudius that's how it appeared. She was sent spinning through the air. She flew as though she had been hit by a saint's ultimate technique. This was crazy because Edis actually attacked from outside of his line of sight. After Rizurd fell, she launched an attack from his blind spot. It was an incredibly deft offense, with no time to think about defense. But yet she jumped into attack with everything that she had. In return, Orsted used only one technique of his own to disable her. Rudius realized that he had seen something similar like this before. Paul showed him a technique like that. It was a water god style technique, though Orsted's execution of it was more polished than Paul's. Edis crashed in the wall. Rocks crumbled from the impact. Edis Boris Greyrat, you've honed your skills quite well. I believe you have potential, but you're still unpolished. Edis let out a groan and tried to get back up. Rudius would try to heal her, but Orsted's eyes were boring down on him. Again, it's almost as if Orsted never took his eyes off of Rudius. Like, even when Rizurd took the hit, it was like he's just peering over Rizurd's shoulder. The whole time that his companions were defeated, Rudius had his demon eye active. All he can see in 1 second of the future was despair. No matter what he did, Orsted would do him in. 1 second from now, his vital points were destroyed. His head, his throat, his heart, his lungs. He watched each one crushed. I love this because in the anime it just shows like this big, like, erratic splatter, and I didn't really know what it was, but that's what it was. And at the same time, he had a vision of him standing there unmoving. Rudius couldn't understand what was going on. If the vision was true, in a second from then, there would be 5 of him. Again, for those who don't remember, the eye is essentially showing him the future. So if he sees like all these paths, it's literally all these different like possibilities. Rudius knew that whatever he did, it was futile. The whole second passed without him doing anything. Orsted slid forward, as if he defied the laws of physics. He was right before him. Instantly, after appearing before him, it was over. 6 ribs fractured simultaneously. At the same time, he felt a pressure from the attack from behind. His lungs were crushed. He vomited blood. Orsted said, "It's best to collapse a magician's lungs." Rudius had an aha moment, realizing what he meant. Crushing a magician's lungs would prevent spell chanting, meaning Rudius couldn't use healing. "When you die, be sure to deliver a message to the man god for me. Tell him that the dragon god Orsted will be the one to kill him." Rudius in his head says, yes, the dragon god, number 2 in the list of the 7 great powers. Orsted gave a glance, then turned to leave. Rudius realized at this moment that his guard was down. He'd received a fatal blow and was at death's door, but he was thinking of fighting back. Perhaps it was because he could see at the edge of his vision, Eris was trying to stand up. Or likely he wasn't sure if he was going to go off and finish Eris and Rajerd. Rudius launched a stone cannon. He wasn't sure why he used stone cannon. He kind of figured maybe just in the moment, he just thought of the most familiar spell to him. He made it the fastest speed, quickest spin possible. The rock turned red as it shot towards Orsted. Like his eye's vision gave him, Orsted blocked it with his fist. Orsted looked at his fist and said, "Stone cannon? That had some incredible power to it. For you to be able to injure me with such magic is impressive." The skin on his fist was peeled slightly. It barely grazed him. "I was sure I crushed your lungs. So you must be using voiceless magic? Is that power you gain from the man god? What else did he give you?" Orsted stared at Rudius. He could have finished him, but instead, he was watching as if he was a grasshopper whose legs he'd plucked off. At this point, Rudius conjured wind magic and forced it into his lungs. He choked violently. He knew there was no point to it, but he filled his lungs before he could stop breathing. An amusing use of magic. But what purpose does it have right now? Why not use voiceless casting to heal your lungs? At this point, Orsted put his hand to his chin, watching him as if he was enjoying seeing him suffer. It is so funny because I got no indication of this in the anime. It almost looks like he's just kind of curious about him. Rudius tried to use the same method as before with stone cannon, but with fire. More mana, stronger the heat, and bigger it got. If stone cannon didn't work, maybe heat and explosive power would work. Oh, that's right, disturbed magic. Suddenly the mana that was taking shape was swept away. It took no form. Instead, it just disappeared. Rudius at this point figured that he had sealed away the power in his right hand, but he still had his left hand. Rudius lifted his left hand and conjured magic between the two of them, unleashing a shockwave. There was an explosive boom as Orsted flew backwards, and Rudius was thrown from the blast. Humph. You nullified my disturbed magic? No, that's not it. You're using multiple magic schools simultaneously. Quite skilled to be doing that voicelessly. Like this, was it? Orsted snapped his fingers with his left hand. A small, square, 50-centimeter window formed in the air. A beautiful window adorned in gorgeous dragon-shaped ornaments. More difficult than I expected. I love this because it's like he just, on a whim, he's creating this window. And like, again, in the anime, it seemed like he was doing it purposely and he knew what he was doing, but it felt like he was experimenting here. Like he was using something he's never used before, which I'll get into more later on. Rudius ignored him and focused on a large, fierce attack. Picturing an enormous flame, a mushroom cloud, a nuclear explosion. He didn't even think about the fact that Eris and Rajerd might be caught up in it. He lost his ability to think at this point. Orsted says, "Open, front worm gate." The mana from his left hand was swallowed. The window frame cracked and splintered. An explosion was simultaneously triggered close to Orsted. Far less powerful than Rudius had expected, and Orsted easily avoided it. What incredible mana capacity. A front worm gate of this size couldn't contain it. It's almost as if you're the same level as Laplace. Well, you are the man god's apostle, after all. Why have you still not healed your lungs? Are you trying to lull me into letting my guard down? This was right before Rudius lost consciousness completely. He had no ability to discern what was happening anymore. Is that it? Orsted closed in on him in a split second. You can't do anything besides magic? With magic sealed, legs frozen, couldn't move, he was helpless in the face of Orsted's murderous intent. Rudius tried to use the roar that he learned in Doldia village, causing Orsted to ready himself, but all Rudius could do was spit out blood to no effect. Just mana. What are you trying to do? There was nothing at this point that Rudius could do, except for possibly prostrating himself before Orsted, but Orsted wouldn't allow him to do that. Well, no matter. Die. At this point, his hand speared through Rudius. Rudius tried to stand, but it's like his body wouldn't listen to him. It betrayed him, crumbling to the ground. The edge of his vision, he could see Eris lifting her head with a stunned look on her face. Rudius! Rudius! Rudius was frustrated. He didn't want to die. He still hadn't fulfilled his promise to Eris. 2 more years. Just 2 more years. Then he could die without reservations. He's like, just gather a little bit of mana. It's just 1 wound. I'll heal it. He couldn't chant the words with the hole in his lungs. Still, I could do it. Just focus. Eris let out a wail. Was he important to you? I'm sorry, Eris Boris Greatrat, but one day you will understand. Let's go, Nanahoshi. Nanahoshi replied, yes. Orsted slowly walked away with the girl falling behind him. Eris couldn't stand, maybe from the damage or the shock. She had no sword. All she could use was her voice. Rajerd, Ghislaine, grandfather, father, mother, Teresa, Paul, I don't care who. Just somebody save him. Rudius is gonna die. Rudius's consciousness was fading. Seriously? This is the end, but I don't want to die. It was then that Nanahoshi said, "Hey, Orsted, there's just one thing that's weighing on me. That boy, wouldn't it be better to just let him live?" Just as Rudius faded, he heard those words. Boom! Just freaking chapter. Just boom! Oh my gosh. It is so crazy. Okay, I will say, the anime was breathtaking. This whole scene nailed the suddenness of it, the impact of it, the music. Oh my gosh, the music. I just rewatched it today. The music. But I don't know. I almost feel as if it didn't hit so many critical points within there that I honestly would have probably not liked them to adapt, because there's a lot of this inner dialogue in explaining that's happening that would ruin an action scene. You honestly can't one-for-one adapt something like this. It just doesn't work, because then you can have way too many moments where it's like these little slowdowns and somebody talks like a huge, long lesson. It had impact. It had everything that I needed to have it in it. But crazy to think of just how much more is kind of being implied here that, again, I think is completely lost in the anime adaptation. I mean, even from the very beginning, when they first arrived there in the anime, they're walking with this ox that has all their stuff on it. They're not on a carriage. In the light novel, they're on a carriage, and they're going through. And then Orsted and Nanahoshi step aside. But it is kind of funny, though, and how the anime kind of portrays this sense of fear that Orsted is creating as they have the ox literally just panic and jump off the face of the cliff. Like, it literally just jumps to its death. That's how terrified it is. But yes, in the light novel, they're on the carriage and they're going along. But anyways, but it was funny because first thing that happens here in the light novel, when they first arrive in front of, or at least when they first kind of meet each other, Orsted looks up and says, "A Superd? Are you a Superd?" Already, Orsted knows that he's a Superd. It's crazy to think about because, again, Rizurd has his head shaved and he has the headband on. You can't see those characteristics that makes a Superd. Now, you can argue that because Orsted indicates that he knows everybody, that he's seen Rizurd before, and maybe he can kind of carry, gather some of those characteristics, something that we're not seeing. But it seems to at least imply that he knows just by looking at somebody, you're a Superd. And it's crazy to think about. Like, is this an innate ability of him, or again, is it a familiarity to so many people that he is seemingly looking at, or at least knows about? Like, I mean, he indicates that he knows about Aisha and Norn. He knows about a lot of people. And again, as we go along, I'm sure we're going to get more and more diving into that whole aspect. But it was interesting that, again, in the light novel, he knows he's a Superd. In the anime, they pass each other, and then Orsted hears Rizurd talking to Edis and Rudius saying, "Don't move." And Orsted picks up on it based on his voice that he is Rizurd. Which I think is an incredible thing in itself, to know who somebody is based on their voice when they've never met before. But it still, again, it indicates that he knew that he was a Superd even before he opened his mouth. Yes, at this point, we've been kind of skirting around the Nanahoshi thing for quite a while. And I think when we first met Nanahoshi in the anime, a lot of speculation was flying up in the anime onlys that based on her hair color, it is kind of an oddity. And plus the Nanahoshi thing. It is kind of funny, though, now having read through the light novel, if I would have gotten to this point, there would have been no question. Like, the moment that Nanahoshi shows up, it's like, yeah, she's Japanese. Like, she's obviously at least possibly from Japan. And again, going back to my theories that I've been having for a long time based on the anime alone, I believe that she was on that corner. Like, she was on the side of it. And that's maybe possibly why she spared his life, is because she knew who he was, possibly being somebody that was transferred with him. I don't know how she would come to that conclusion, though. That's the only thing that kind of breaks that. But at least I know that she is possibly the one that was there with him that he tried to save. Which I guess my theory would go in the idea that if she has black hair and that's not matching to this world specifically, that means that possibly she was picked up and drawn to that world, whereas Rudius kind of died and his spirit went with her. That's my ongoing theory that I have going, is that he kind of was dragged along with her. She was intended to go over there, and he was dragged with her, which would kind of indicate why she's older too. But there could be a time difference through that transfer. Doesn't mean they have to come at the same exact time. It could have been a transfer that on the path to time had progressed. But no, I love, again, I think it nailed it in the anime. I really do love that sense of the dread that Rajerd and Eris has. Obviously, we don't find out until the meeting with Man God in chapter 10 why that is. He's got this curse of fear, and everybody that looks upon him is terrified. And again, in the anime, the ox jumping off the cliff. But in this one specifically, it's betraying it by the fact that Rajerd, who is this very incredibly powerful person, is paler and his face is bead with sweat. He is struck with fear. Rudy says, I know that look. It's fear. Rajerd, of all the people they've ever met, of all this time they've spent with Rajerd, he's terrified. Why? Why? If he doesn't know who this guy is, why is he terrified with him? And Rudy just can't figure it out. Like, this dude, why is everybody afraid of him? Do they know who this guy is? What's the deal here? It's just purely by the curse itself that they are struck with fear. And that's what Orsted jumps on. And again, I think it was something that we kind of get a hint of in the anime, but not necessarily fully kind of solidified until, again, reading this, is this idea of Orsted realizes, even after their eyes meet, wait, you're not terrified of me. Why is that? That's what Orsted picks up on. I guess technically it's a culmination. It's the fact that Rudy is standing here not afraid of him. He literally called out to him and said, hey, what, dude, hold up a second. And this is, again, let's imagine this. Orsted, this guy that has this curse, everybody's terrified and hates him because of this curse. Everywhere he goes, people are terrified and scared of, which, by the way, take note of that. Nanahoshi's walking beside him obviously means that we find out later on through the Man God in chapter 10 that the reason why he possibly isn't afraid of the curse or not affected by the curse is because he's from another world. Nanahoshi's walking with him, doesn't hate him, is not terrified of him. I'm getting sidetracked. But no, it's like this culmination of, okay, wait. You're from who? Paul? No, Paul has 2 daughters. He never had a son. Okay, now you're looking me in the eye and you're not terrified. Something is odd about you. Like, he picks up on it. All because Rudy's couldn't keep his big mouth shut. Like, I laughed when I watched the anime because I'm like, you had to say Man God. Yeah, I know who that is. He comes in my dreams. Why would you say that, Rudius? No, it was the moment that he spoke up. He should have never said a damn thing. But no, it's super good. Now, the crazy thing is, and this is where I'm going to start getting the crazy theories, and again, I don't want people to confirm, deny, positive, negative, just zip it. He said specifically, Paul had 2 daughters. And this is the interesting thing because it didn't really dawn on me until I read through this, and it was something that I didn't really piece together when I watched the anime. I'm spending a lot more time than ever really trying to dig into every single word that Refugin says. You remember way back in, was it Millis? After Paul and Rias had their little spout, when they were talking afterwards, and they're just kind of shooting the crap, and they're talking about all this stuff, he says specifically that Paul was trying again to have another child. It wasn't working. He said, for some reason, with you, Rudius, it's the first time. Bam, it just happened. Which, again, implies this idea that if something wasn't working and pulling the strings in the background, Paul and Zenith, they wouldn't have had it that first time. They would probably have kept trying until eventually Norn happened. But for some reason, that first time, it happened. Now, that is a puzzling thing. It actually technically means that it could have probably still happened the first time. It would have been a Norn. But it begs the question mark of the reason why all that kind of went down is because it almost as if something pushed it to happen. Now, granted, because Orsted knows that he has 2 daughters, it does technically mean that Rudius, that Paul and Zenith would have came together. If that one night stand didn't really have something come from it, they wouldn't have broke off from the party and then had children. Or he wouldn't have got Lilia helping them out with Norn and then have Aisha. So I guess it doesn't technically play into that whole thing, but it was still kind of interesting to note that Paul was kind of shocked that it happened so quickly. And again, everything beyond that, they were struggling to have children. But no, it was one of those cool things to realize that Orsted at that point can't see Rudius. He's never been able to see Rudius. And that was something they kind of implied with the EDs of the anime, which I thought was really cool, that whole idea that all these shots of Rajerd and Eris traveling around, and there was just kind of this nothingness where Rudius was. It was always what Orst had seen. He could see that Rajerd and Eris were kind of traveling around, but he could never see Rudius. Rudius was always this kind of thing that was never existent in his eyes, which sort of makes you wonder, what is Man-God saying in the next chapter? That specifically because he has this curse, everybody hates him. He also has this other curse that makes it to where I can't see him. Well, if that's the case, is it because Rudius is from another world that he can't see him, or is it because Rudius is a cursed child? Now, I'm not quite sure how that would work, because how would the Man-God be able to see Rudius if he was a cursed child like Orsted is, where you can't see him? And that's also to take the Man-God's word for it, that he does know where Orsted's at. But anyways, I think the only thing that kind of creates a question mark is if Orsted can't see Rudius, is it because he is a cursed child that is not being able to be seen by these visions, or if it's just simply the fact that Rudius now existing in this world is this anomaly that sort of breaks what Orsted has already seen will unfold. Orsted wasn't seeing Rudius because he's seen this vision of everything that's going to happen, and Rudius wasn't a part of that vision, but now Rudius is. Thus, he never seen him before. It brings up a huge question mark around all that stuff, and it's something that I'm sure is going to get explained over time, but I am deeply curious about exactly how that works. And I think another thing that kind of plays into that is the fact that Orsted initially says, "I don't recognize you without your hair." Obviously implying that he has always seen Rajerd with his hair. And now suddenly, Rajerd not having his hair, he's not able to recognize him. Why would Rajerd not have his hair? Because Rudius changed the future, changed the vision that he had seen. But I think the thing that I always loved about this certain encounter was really around the fact of how, I guess, very familiar Orsted is with both Eris and Rajerd. Always giving off this thought process, or this way of talking as if, oh, we are not acquainted yet. As if eventually they're supposed to meet each other. That sometime in the future, Orsted knows that he will one day meet Eris. He will meet Rajerd. Question mark is, under what circumstances? I think it's kind of implied quite a lot with this encounter, as if one day Orsted will be working alongside them. That he's always seen potential in Eris, it's just that she's not polished. That he sees potential in her. That one day she will be polished and she will utilize her. Or possibly that he never meant to utilize her because she was always unpolished. But still indicating that she was or is a possibility that he will use her. To what effect is the question mark. Yeah. It's the way that this writer does his work, it sort of leaves everything up to who is actually the bad guy. I mean, that's the whole thing with the Man-God's conversation with Rudius in the next chapter, and I know I'm going to keep jumping to that. Hopefully this video will get into it. It implies that Orsted and the Man-God are at odds with each other. But the Man-God says, oh, well, he's evil and I'm good, so obviously he's going to hate me. No, it sort of implies that he hates your guts and sees you as a threat. But is Orsted the good guy and the Man-God is the bad guy? Or is the possibility that nobody really is a bad guy, they just all have their goals and they're at odds with each other somehow. And so obviously Orsted would see him as a threat, the Man-God would see him as a threat. But the problem is, it seems as if the two of them cannot see what each other are doing, so they're going to hit those crossroads and have to act on them. Orsted does that. Another interesting kind of thing that happens in this encounter is that Orsted never takes his eyes off Rudius. And I'm kind of curious why that is. Obviously, he sees him as a threat. He sees him as an anomaly, something that should not be here, and thus it needs to get rid of really quickly because it doesn't match to his vision. I think that's why he gets this almost tunnel vision to Rudius. Again, the moment that Rajerd stepped between them, he is peering over Rajerd's shoulder at Rudius. And again, as Eris attacks him, he's still beaming down on Rudius. Now, he could have looked away in order to deflect Eris or whatever, but it sort of implies that every time Rudius mentions, he's always looking at Rudius specifically. He never says anything about... Orsted looks at Edis and says, you're not that worthy. He kind of does it after Rudius has been kind of seemingly killed, but still. Another thought that I had in my head was that, is it possible that Orsted even now can't see Rudius? He sees that something's there, but he doesn't know it. Maybe there are some cursed beings that, through somebody like the Dragon God, Orsted, or the Man God, can't see them, but they know that they're there. And the possibility that he didn't want to take his eyes off of Rudius because of that. I think that's probably a little bit of a stretch, but still, it's something that's been flowing in my head. I do like how specific the light novel is with Rudius slipping out that he knows the Man God. In the anime, it's sort of like, do you know the name Man God? And Rudius goes, oh yeah, I know about him. It's just kind of like he just slips it out. But in the light novel, it's more going for a sense of, he felt that Orsted had some knowledge and a familiarity in that. He's never been able to talk to anybody about the Man God, and then somebody brings it up, and he goes, a kindred spirit, basically. Like, somebody that knows about the Man God. Here's a chance for me to sort of get more information out of. We have a commonality here. Let's sit down and have tea and talk about the Man God, and then eventually I can talk to him about this whole incident. He knows something, I just don't know what he knows. So maybe this will give me the capability of us sitting down and talking about this. So that's sort of why he kind of slips that out. But now the fight itself was absolutely incredible. And I think the key thing that it kind of indicates here is that Orsted is utilizing a lot of stuff. He's utilizing this worm gate, which, again, we've only really known about with Roger talking about Petagus. He talked about how Petagus would deploy this front worm gate, and he'd deploy a back worm gate. The front one was to absorb the mana. The back one was to flow it into himself. So it was almost like a mage killer, in a sense, because he's able to just absorb everything, give it to himself. And again, like I said when I was reading through it, it was kind of shocking in the idea that it almost feels as if he's trying things. It was almost as if he was kind of experimenting with Rudius. Rudius was this oddity that he's never really experienced before. And the light novel almost indicates it as if him going, you did that too. You did voiceless casting. Interesting. I sealed that. How are you doing that? Oh no, you're using voiceless casting of multiple elements. Okay, let's try this out. Snaps his finger. Here's his worm gate. I guess that worked. It's almost as if he's experimenting. Like, he's never used this worm gate before. He's just going to try it out. Again, it almost indicates that he just knows a lot of things, but he's never tried them before. And again, he's also using this water god technique to essentially deflect all these abilities that Rajerd is just plowing at him. And it's very subtle. I like how it's indicating this idea that he's using very small movements very fast. So he's not going like crazy movements. He's just kind of deflecting very, very quickly, very small movements to really kind of wear down Rajerd and never allow any opening. It almost kind of indicated this little bit of sense of he knew that over time he was wearing down Rajerd. And like Rajerd, I guess the best way to put it is Rudius kind of specifically saying that it's almost as if he's falling into a trap. It's like this indication that Rajerd attacking him, every time he attacks him, Orsted is kind of leading him into a trap. Like, you're not going to get it. You keep coming at me, that's fine. He keeps leaving these little openings for him, and then he's constantly whittling him down. Based on the fact that it seems as if he knows the future, I wonder if Orsted has the ability at this point to really just kind of know what exactly Rajerd's going to do and counter it. I did like that in the anime it sort of indicated that Rudius was going to do something that he probably shouldn't do with his final blow. I mean, he's creating this big, massive flaming ball that is literally charring the edge, or at least pulling away the moisture, if anything, of the walls themselves. And that's kind of how they portray it in the anime. But it's a sense here that he's like thinking of like making the biggest boom possible. Like, he's thinking mushroom cloud, nuclear explosion. That's how much he's just envisioning. I want to create something that will just obliterate what's in front of me. And even here, he's sort of thinking, I'm basically losing all ability to really think. I didn't think about the fact that Edis is right there, Rajerd's right there. It almost makes me wonder if Orsted, knowing that these two in this area are for something later, it's a possibility that Orsted saved Edis and Rajerd, which I think is pretty cool to think about. Like, this idea that, again, playing in this idea that Edis and Rajerd are going to be joining Orsted eventually. That would explain why he would use a worm gate to absorb the impact rather than to let it just go off and go, well, I'll just dodge it. He knows that whatever Rudius is creating needs to be stopped for the sake of Edis and Rajerd. Again, he didn't kill them. He never did. But like I said, I think the most interesting thing about this fight itself, at least in the light novel, is just kind of this indication that Orsted was kind of fascinated by Rudius. Again, he does acknowledge that Rudius is some sort of pawn of the man god, somebody that he hates, somebody that is all seemingly at this point somebody who will work against him, and that he needs to stop any indication of the man god messing with him. So Rudius is a huge threat, but at the same time, it almost gives an indication that he kind of finds Rudius fascinating. He doesn't just go in there and destroy him. Or you can also say this is an indication that Orsted doesn't know what Rudius is capable of doing. I mean, that's why he was mentioning early. Rudius felt like this guy was sort of treating him as if he was something of a threat. Like he didn't know what Rudius was capable of. But still, as it's going along, he's sort of testing him and going, oh, you're able to still cast. How'd you get past my ceiling? Oh, no, you're using voiceless casting of multiple elements. So again, is it an aspect of him keeping his distance and testing him, or just an aspect of pure caution? It was odd that the anime adaptation of Edis screaming out for anybody, the grandfather, father, Therese wasn't mentioned in the anime. And it's like, you technically could have still had her say Therese. I mean, Therese did tell her, I think even in the anime with the adaptation, that if you ever need anything, ask for me. But yeah, you can also say that she briefly met her in the anime. So why would she bring up Therese? I think in a moment of panic, you're going to call to anybody. But anyways, that's chapter 9. So much crazy stuff. Hopefully I hit everything. I know that I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to go, crap, I forgot to talk about this. But yeah, just a lot of really crazy stuff. And yes, technically Nanahoshi at the very end saying that, you know, it'd be better if you just let him live. There's something about that boy. Something's weighing on me, which again, I think is an indication that she knows, there's a possibility she knows who Rudius is. Which again, I don't know how she would get an indication of knowing that he's an isekai, but she could be really, really smart and very incited to what's going on. We don't really know what she's capable of. We do know that she's basically changed the entire Dragon King realm into having a bunch of rice. I meant to get into that whole thing before, again, indicating that she's been here longer than Rudius, and that obviously a lot of this area has been shaped by her. Now, what can be shaped in such a short period of time? We don't know how old Nanahoshi is. We don't know if she just ages very slowly. And again, we don't know that there's somebody before her, maybe even Orsted, that could be an isekai. Why else would there be, again, literally this entire region they just came from is literally inspired by Japan. But again, they're not very good at certain foods, so it sort of indicates that it hasn't been too long. They haven't perfected a lot of this style. But again, I think Nanahoshi or somebody involved with the Dragon King realm is an isekai, at least. Again, the whole Nanahoshi style is a big indicator there. All right, screw it. Against my better judgment, this is probably going to be a disaster trying to edit this, but let's keep going. Chapter 10. Let's get into it. Rudius was suddenly in a completely white space of nothingness. Normally, he'd immediately feel disgusted, returning to his hideous being of his previous life, memories of regret, conflict, vulgarity, and entitlement. At the same time, memories formed in the last 12 years would grow distant. Dejection would well up inside of him. He would feel as if he was caught up in a dream, and an uneasiness would fill his chest. But this time was different. He had a sense of loss, as if he had a gaping hole in his chest. Looking down, there was indeed one. He really did die. Suddenly he noticed the man god was there with his usual irritating smile. But it didn't annoy Rudius. He wondered why. Maybe the hole in his chest, or possibly because he decided to not be hostile. Well, what can I say? It's unfortunate. Yep, it really is unfortunate. You're different than usual. Are you okay? Not feeling good? As you can see, I have a hole in my chest. Mind if I ask you one thing? What is it? That guy, the one named Orsted, he attacked me the second he heard your name. Why is that? Because he's a terrible dragon god. Despite how virtuous I am, he has a lot of hatred for me. Virtuous, huh? That's an easy one to hold enmity for. But if that were the case, should you have told me beforehand? You can see all kind of things, can't you? You knew I was going to run into Orsted, right? If you had at least told me, I wouldn't have mentioned your name. No, sorry. The truth is, I can't see anything that has to do with the dragon god. Not the future, nor the present. I had no idea you're going to run into him. He has a curse on him that makes me unable to see him. Curse? Those actually exist? Yes. You didn't hear about them in your world? Someone who was born possessing an unusual power thanks to an abnormality triggered by mana? Kind of makes me wonder, again, going back to my theory about the whole thing with Paul and Zenith. I think they were technically traveling together, possibly in Labyrinth, so maybe a mana disturbance with Rudius when they got pregnant. We don't even have a concept of magic in the world I came from. There was some that said they can have the ability to sense the supernatural, but to be honest, they lacked any credibility. Aha, I see then. Well, we have that here. Cursed children, we call them. Odd ones. Orsted is one such example. Well, he's got about 3 curses as well. 4, huh? That's incredible. Oh yeah, I heard about that. Blessed children and cursed children was it, right? Yes, that's it. They're the same thing, actually. Humans just like binaries. So that's it. So what kind of curse does he have? Well, you saw how Reserved and Eris were terrified of him, right? That's one of his curses. Every living thing in this world either hates or fears him. Everyone hates him? Well, that's kind of unpleasant. My spirit would break instantly if that were me. I understand how he feels being hated. I like how Rudius immediately here gets some sort of commonality with Orsted. Again, from his previous life being treated terribly. He sort of feels the same feeling there. Being outed by the school and people treating him like he's just garbage. Hold on, you don't need to sympathize with him. He was born that way. He's an evil being who's trying to destroy the world. Come on, don't say that. Anyone who's constantly surrounded by people who hate them would want to end the world. I had the same thoughts in my previous life. I often grumbled about it on the internet, saying how I wished everyone would just die. You think so? I hate him, and I don't really care how he feels. Again, going back to what I was saying before. Man God, you're suddenly becoming the bad guy, the villain. Does that mean you're affected by the curse too? The fact that you can't see him is because of one of the curses placed on him, right? So he's got a curse that makes him hated, a curse that you can't see him. What else? Who knows? I can't see him, so I don't know. Okay, but if he's dangerous, then it's all more reason I wish you would have told me something like that existed. I never dreamed the two of you would ever meet. Walking about the world as vast as this one, the chances of you running into each other would be like finding a needle in a haystack, right? Come to think of it, I don't feel any hatred or fear towards him. Why is that? Isn't that because you came from another world? So those from another world aren't affected by the curse? That's what it looks like. The same thing happened when you met Reserved, right? Huh? Hold up a second. What are you talking about? Is Reserved one of those cursed children too? Nope, that's just the curse of Laplace's lance. Laplace also had a curse of fear on him, but he transferred it into the spears and passed it on to the Superb Triad instead. He made their green hair the key to its effectiveness. Curse? He passed it off? Hey, what's going on here? You knew about it and that's why you had me help him? You made me waste my time and effort? No, don't get the wrong idea. The curse on the entire Superb Triad will gradually fade over time. A bit of it remains in Reserved, but since his hair is cut, that immediately reduced its effectiveness. Now that you mentioned it, Sylphie was bullied about her hair. But I didn't get the impression she was feared. That aside, why the hair? Because it's the source of their mana? Because Laplace's hair was also green. No comments. No chat. No chat. Should I get into this now? Yeah, I guess I'll get into it now. I've been trying for a while now to figure out, and this is, I guess to get a spoiler in here. Again, this is for somebody that has watched the first season. I have also watched the preview of the second season. I have read all of these Fitz chapters. So this is my theory based on up to chapter 10 of volume 6 and watching the first season as well as watching the preview for second season. I have been trying to figure out why Sylphie's hair is no longer green when she is now Fitz. Again, I'm assuming Fitz is Sylphie. But the big question mark has always been, why did Sylphie's hair turn white the moment she was displaced? And I think this is finally the answer. Is because she had the green hair, and whatever curse of the hair itself has finally been lifted. Which makes me believe... I've been trying for a while now to figure out what's special about Sylphie. And again, shh. Chat? Shh. Commenters? Shh. Please. I'm just speculating here. Let me find it out over time. I just want to have fun speculating for right now. I'm thinking Sylphie's are related to Laplace somehow. Because again, it's hitting heavy on the fact that that Laplace had green hair, and it's a curse. He placed it upon the spirits themselves, and again, indicating that Sylphie has had green hair and no longer has green hair. And I've been trying to figure out, Sylphie is not just a child of two people in this small village. She's very incredible in many ways. There's got to be something special about her. I think that's the answer. That she somehow, doesn't have to be the child of, but she's somehow tied to Laplace. But we'll see. Rudius continues. Now I get it. There was something similar to that in my world too. Using points of commonality and wordplay to put curses on people and remove them. At any rate, thanks to this involvement of yours, the curse is fading. There's still a deep-rooted sense of discrimination that remains. But with time, and Regird's own efforts, maybe he can do something to change that. So, it wasn't a waste after all. I'm glad to hear that then. I guess you do put some thoughts into your action. Well, it'll be difficult for you to completely erase all the prejudice against the Superds. It is a complicated matter, after all. Still, yeah. At any rate, that's great. Yes, great indeed. Looks like it was worth it to introduce the two of you. That's the reason you introduced us? If that was the case, shouldn't you have just told me that? You had no intentions of listening to what I had to say at first, did you? I didn't get a chance. Well, I guess that's true. I was pretty hostile when I turned you away. Can't deny that. That aside, even Regird was easily bested by Orsted. I never imagined him to be easily defeated. Given his opponent, of course Regird would lose. Yeah, he is one of the 7 great powers after all. Who could defeat him? You can't. You can't? I guess there really is a great difference in ability. He's the strongest person in the world, even as restricted as he is with all those curses. The strongest? But the Dragon God's only second in the 7 great powers. What about the first? The Technique God is strong, but if Orsted went all out, he'd be the victor. Orsted can use all the skills and techniques that currently exist in the world. He can also use his own unique magic that's specific to the Dragon God. All the skills and techniques? Sounds like a certain post-apocalypse savior I know. Oh? You have something like that in your world too? They can copy all the techniques of every opponent they've ever fought, although they're plenty strong even without that ability. Enough to destroy their opponent with the tip of their finger. With just the tip of their finger? That's incredible. But so is Orsted, if he gets serious. He could destroy the entire world. Just calling him strong seems a bit vague. How strong are we talking? Like, abnormally? Disastrously? Either way, he can't unleash his real power thanks to the curse. So that's the problem. Those curses sure are pain. But, by the way, can I ask you something? What is it? Just a second ago, you said you didn't know anything about his curses, right? You said you didn't know about them other than the one where he's hated, and the one where you can't see anything to do with him. So why do you know that he can't unleash his real power? It's fine. This is the end, so let's just get along. I won't fuss no matter what you're hiding from me. I understand you cared about Regird after all. And it's also thanks to you that Lilia and Aisha are saved. I'm not gonna quibble over little lies that you told. No matter what your plans were for me in the future, they end up short-lived anyways. To be honest, there's a lot of things I'd like to ask you though. Such as why you introduced me to the world's greatest emperor and stuff. Or where are the other missing people located? Or what your real objective is even in the first place. All things that are kind of a bit too late to ask now. Well, what can I say? We're both failures. So, let's be friends. Let's drop the formalities and have a blast together. We can dance naked, show our hidden talents, and of course, I don't mind if we draw faces on our bellies and talk to each other with them. The end? Yes, this is the end. I mean, isn't it? I died after all. Oh, I see. You've lost all hope and given up. The complete opposite to what you were when you first met, right? I mean, well, technically, the last time I died without knowing what was going on. This time, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Besides, I knew more or less that when I died, I'd end up here. I have no idea where people go when they die. But I thought you'd come and talk to me when it happened. Looks like my consciousness is fading away. Looks like it's about time for us to part ways anyways. I'm glad in the end that we were able to talk with a calm conversation. So, that's what this is about. Well, I have good news for you. You're not dead. Before he knew what was happening, the hole in his chest disappeared. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. Edis was right in front of him. He was lying on the ground looking up at her. He realized that Edis was cradling his head in her lap, face full of anxiety, as if she was looking at something she never wanted to see. But then, relief showed up on her face. Her eyes were bloodshot. Rudius, you're awake? He tried to talk, but blood came out instead. He stopped coughing up blood, but only started choking violently. Edis stroked his back. Are you okay? Why am I alive? The wound in his chest was closed completely. Well, not completely. There was a scar. It was almost as if somebody had welded him shut. He thought it was weird, but his right hand didn't have an alien parasite attached to it. Nice reference. Edis says, just a moment ago, when that girl said something, Orsted or whatever his name was, used magic to heal you. Girl? He called her Nanahoshi. Rudius realized this moment he heard that name before, sometime in the last year, he just couldn't recall it. So he just went out of his way to heal somebody he just killed? Rudius was sure that his heart was pierced. Severe damage to his internal organs couldn't be healed with just mere intermediate magic. That must have meant that he used advanced tier or something more powerful. Some magic that could instantly save someone who sustained a fatal injury. It seems the man god wasn't lying when he said Orsted could use any skill or technique in the world. Rudius says, I was utterly defeated. Accurate statements considering that this was a second in the world's 7 great powers. Technically, according to the man god, the actual strongest. Clearly, this title wasn't for show. He knows that Rizard was sleeping nearby. The carriage was pulled to the edge of the road, a fire was crackling. Eris had done all of this herself? Rudius then says, this is the first time I've seen Rizard lying on his side like that. Eris says, Rudius, you shouldn't talk yet. You were just choking up blood. I'm fine now. Those are just dregs still left in my throat. Rudius honestly didn't want to move. He wanted to stay in her lap forever. He wondered what would happen if he flipped over his face in a certain direction. He figures it was human instincts of survival to want to leave offspring in the wake of death. Whatever. Don't think it. Just dive in. Rudius says, being alive is a wonderful thing. He spun his body over and wrapped his arm around Eris's waist. He took in a long, deep breath of her scent. Rudius, you're awfully enthusiastic. I kind of feel like everything seems to be overflowing. More than usual, maybe because Orsted, or maybe because the dream of the man god, but there was no doubt he felt unusually energetic since he woke up. Eris says, then you're fine with me hitting you, right? There was a tremor in her voice. An angry one by the sound of it. Oh well. Rudius couldn't blame her. She had been so worried, and Rudius honestly just took the opportunity to harass her. Sure, go ahead. She punched him. Then she pulled him towards her chest and wrapped her arms tightly around his head, her chest soft against his cheek. He could hear her heart pounding. Then came faint sounds of sobs. She was crying. She says, thank God. He reached up and gently patted her back. And that's chapter 10. Holy crap. I kind of jumped into a bit of it midway through because I honestly didn't want to forget things, but what an absolutely incredible chapter. And again, mostly all covered in the anime. But again, I think while it does talk about the hair color stuff and the fading of the curse and stuff like that, I just don't think, with certain things implied in there, it sort of makes me more geared towards my thought process that I have on, like, what I said about Sylvie. All right, where do I start? Where do I start? Again, I've kind of hit a couple things throughout this whole thing. I did forget to mention in Chapter 9, it was really cool to see that Rudius was going to use the Doldia Roar. And again, I said that way back there when they first mentioned the idea that he was being taught how to do the roar. It didn't really work really well, but at the time when I noticed that they didn't even cover that in the anime, I was kind of curious there'll become a time where he's gonna use it, and then it's not gonna be explained because the anime skipped it. And I got another case where they just completely skipped it in the anime both times. But no, I love how this chapter 10 opens up, this idea that when he first arrived there, he doesn't have that same feeling he typically does. And he kind of equates to the fact that, well, last time I didn't know what the hell was going on. And now I kind of have a sense of what's going on. And he doesn't have as much regret and hatred in his heart. Like it sucks, but that's life. He now understands why it happened. He understands what he just went through. We're already getting a sense here that, again, the man god is really trying to, again, not really tell the full truth of what's going on. I think you're really quickly getting a sense, and I think it was better portrayed in the anime, to be honest, unless it was a misstep by their part. I'm assuming they do it for a purpose. But it really does give a sense that the man god's giving all this information about Orsted, but he keeps saying that I can't see him. He has all this stuff, but I can't see him. Oh, he does this, but I can't see him. He has a curse that I can't see him. He has a curse that makes him feared and hated. Apparently, he has a curse that prevents him from using his powers to its full extent. And then there's a fourth one. So we at least know 3 of them. Again, fear and hatred, being unseen by at least the gods. I don't know exactly. Obviously, Rudius can see him. Rizard, Edis can see him. So it specifically seems like it's a curse that only certain people can't see them. Or maybe it's a curse that Orsa can control who can see him. And then again, a curse that seems to be keeping him from being able to unlock all of his potential, all of his power. But again, even though he's saying that he can't see Orsted, didn't know that he would run into him, he seems to know a lot about him. So he's not giving full details here. And again, in the anime, it sort of shows the man god kind of go, oh crap, he just realized that. Yeah, I kind of do know a lot about him. Again, he knows that he hates him. He wants him dead. He's a virtuous god, and thus this evil, terrible dragon god wants him dead. Why would he want him dead? The man god specifically says that the dragon god wants to destroy the world. He hates the world. He wants to destroy it. He has the power to destroy it. Why doesn't he? If the dragon god is so powerful that he can destroy the world, that if he fought the technique god, he could destroy the world, why doesn't he? Is it the curse that's preventing him from having his full potential to destroy the world? Or is it because the dragon god doesn't want to destroy the world, but the man god's making Rudeus believe that he does? Again, this is already sowing in a lot of doubt, and I was already having that doubt with how the man god was describing him in the anime. This is even cementing it even more. Again, like I mentioned in the last chapter analysis, yes, a key thing they're kind of pointing out here as well is that Rudeus isn't affected by this fear. He wasn't affected when Rajerd first encountered them. He's not being affected here with Orsted. It seems like the man god is confirming, at least what he's saying, is it because Rudeus is from another world, he's not affected by that curse. But again, I think that is cementing Nanahoshi as possibly not as well. We had technically 5 people there during this encounter, and 2 people weren't frozen solid. Well, Orsted too, because he's the one with the curse. But again, it kind of cements this idea that Nanahoshi, if that's true, and that's the reason why Rudeus is not infected by it, that could initially say that that implies that Nanahoshi is from another world as well. Now, going back to my whole thing that I said midway through here, yes, I think this is sort of throwing a huge theory into my head. As I was reading this chapter, my brain just started shooting in a million different directions when I read this segment about specifically green hair. And I think it's more cemented in the idea that in the light novel, Rudeus specifically jumps onto Sylphie. He immediately starts thinking about Sylphie. Oh yeah, that's right, Sylphie had green hair too. But I think people were just bullying her. I don't think they feared her or they hated her. I think that as well. I think that's the only thing that sort of ruins my theory on Sylphie being somehow tied to Laplace in some way. It doesn't mean that she's directly a descendant of Laplace. It just means that for some reason she has green hair. It seems to imply that Laplace had green hair. The green hair was what he gave to he put the curse on the spear and gave it to the Superds and applied the fear through their green hair. And says that over time that is going to fade. And I think, again, because Sylphie goes from having green hair to then having white hair as fits, if again that's the case, that means that she has lost, maybe through the displacement itself, lost that green hair, lost that curse. Or maybe transferred it to something else. Because it implies a lot, with a lot of discussion around fits, that people fear fits. And that could just be based on the fact that the stories that were told, or just how confident Fitz looks whenever they're doing something. But we'll see. But that's my going theory. That's my going theory. I love how they kind of go out of the way to mention the idea of how super rare it was that they ran into each other. That Orsted and Nanahoshi crossed paths with Rudeus, and he was basically saying, why didn't you tell me about this dude? He's like, well, the chance of you guys running into each other, I never thought it would happen, but somehow it did. Kind of implies that there might have been something in effect that pushed them to run into each other. Again, is the man god telling the whole truth? Did he actually want Rudeus to encounter the man god? Did he want to test something? Did he want to check something there? Did he want Rudeus to bump into Nanahoshi? I would assume that man god knows that Nanahoshi is with Orsted. Maybe the man god wanted this to happen and for Nanahoshi to see Rudeus. That's where I'm going with it. And for some reason, the man god doesn't want to tell him, yeah, I'm sorry I put you through that. You remember that chick that you just ran into? Remember her. That's nothing is going to happen without reason. Yes, a lot of this has to do with Rudeus realizing just how fragile he is. And hopefully, and technically, and again, this goes to the man god, technically, Edis learns something from this. As we see with the end of the first season, Edis immediately leaves Rudeus' side. She knew that she wasn't strong enough to rely on him, and she kept relying on him, and then that blew up in her face. She wasn't able to protect Rudeus, finally. She had the chance to, she wasn't able to. So maybe, again, the man god wanted this to happen so that Edis goes and learns to fight better. Rudeus has this blow up in his face, and again, Nanahoshi meets Rudeus. Again, another thing that I really think that the anime pulled off really well was that feeling that Rudeus was kind of happy, knowing that at least he had accomplished something. Again, we're in a mindset that Rudeus right now is that, that was it. That was fun. I tried. Oops, I'm dead. he's like, he's starting to feel like it was all a waste of time when he starts to talk about Rijerd. But then at some point he realizes, oh wait, so it is working. So Rijerd will eventually break this curse. He will change people's minds. So it was worth it. Like, at least I accomplished something. Like, that wasn't a waste of time. I helped him. I like that in the idea that it's both him acknowledging that he has accomplished something, but also that he is relieved that Rijerd is going to have a good life going forward. Like, the one thing he set out to do, he achieved it. But again, the thing that's lost in the anime that is, this is the second time he's really hitting on it, is that Rudius still believes that the man god doesn't care about Rudius. The man god was only after Rijerd. That he is a byproduct. That man god was using Rudius this entire time. The whole reason the man god was using Rudius was to get to Rijerd. He says that. I know that you cared about Rijerd. You were just after him. But at least you helped me get, Lilia and Aisha to safety. It sucks that the man god doesn't confirm nor deny. He just kind of just lets him go on his little rant. But again, it's Rudius still at this point, believing that he himself is insignificant. It's about Rijerd. It's not about him. The man god only cared about Rijerd. But yes, Rudius waking up and then the whole scene with Edis, which is just was so good. It's so good. It hits hard. And I think the big difference between the anime and the light novel is obviously that it's unashamed about how Rudius is pretty much saying that, yeah, I'm feeling a little frisky. Hugs her out of just pure wanting to just sniff up her scent. Like, it's not ashamed of admitting. He's like, I think it's usually in the state of death that you have this desire to create offspring. Like, he's just feeling like, I just want to get with Edis right now. It was kind of weird because in this whole kind of conversation about this kind of energy that he has, that he's grabbing towards Edis and he's pulling her in and, breathing in and everything. She's talking about how he's energetic. And he mentions specifically that more than usual, maybe because of Orsted or maybe because of the dream of the man god, but there was no doubt that he felt unusually energetic since he woke up. Maybe sort of wonder, and again, this could be one of those things of like he mentions, the whole near-death experience driving him to want to reproduce or whatever, the basic instincts. Seems odd to point this out. Like, it seems like they're going out of their way to point out that he's got this different vigor in him. Yes, it could be simply that he had this near-death experience and he nearly lost everything. He's energetic because I nearly lost this. I have another shot at it, so I'm going to grab it. He's realizing at this point the importance of something before you now that he nearly lost it. And so he doesn't want to let go of it. And I can see that part of it. But then there's so I have like a romantic side of it. Like, I have this side of it that's more philosophical and it's in the mind of the person itself. Obviously a desire that somebody would have to grab a hold of something that you nearly lose. Then there's the, I guess, more physical thought process in my head, which is there a chance that this feeling of energy within him was something that the dragon god placed upon him when he healed him? Did the dragon god give him something? Or in the dragon god healing him from a mortal wound, did it just change something in Rudius? Did he pass something off to Rudius? Some sort of mana? Maybe he had to push a bunch of mana in him in order to fix everything that was broken. Like, he literally destroyed his insides. Maybe there was something of a different energy that's in him now than was before. So I'll be curious if going forward it's going to be, an aspect of, no, he just simply realized, I have this again and I nearly lost this and now I'm feeling like I need to grab a hold of it again. Or is it no, there's something in him that wasn't there before. But again, it's hitting heavy on how he's acknowledging what Edis had done. Like, everything that just happened, Edis put everything together for them. Put a fire together, got them all laid up, was taking care of them. Edis was doing that all on her own. In the absence of Rijerd, in the absence of him, Edis took care of everything. Again, it's going on that whole idea of the growth of Edis herself, that she's become an adult. She has become a warrior. Rijerd would no longer look at her as a child. She is, again, being responsible. It's a little bit of a sign of how responsible she is. In the wake of everything that just happened, she took the time to put everything together and took care of them. She took it upon herself to handle the situation by herself. Even considering that she probably still has wounds of her own, unless Nanahoshi healed her too. But again, they never said that Orsted healed her or healed Reserved. So she's probably still in a lot of pain, and yet she did all this stuff for them. But yes, that was the indication there that Orsted was pretty much told by something by Nanahoshi, and that's why he healed him. Somebody that he just killed. Anyways, that is Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, Volume 6. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, it's a lot of fun. I definitely appreciate everybody for stopping by, and thanks for waiting a whole week. I know I probably created a lot of angry people last week putting this off until this week, but like I said, I pretty much figured it was going to be a video in itself, and it's already looking like it's going to be a really long edit, but hopefully everything edits fine. If you're seeing this, it edited fine, or I split it up in two. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. As usual, definitely appreciate you guys' support. All those that join in the premieres, all those leave comments, all those hit the like button. Everybody, your support, I greatly appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button so you got my content. I do news reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, I do a chapter-by-chapter analysis of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I greatly appreciate it. Consider supporting us on Patreon, our tips link, or Super Thanks button down below. We also have a membership button there you can click on that supports the channel, and you get some cute little speech channel emotes. I greatly appreciate everybody that does. And with all that said, until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care.